And we are live. Hello there, friends. I'm happy to see you here today. I'm having a very special guest. This is a very good friend of mine. He's from Iceland, originally from Iceland, but he now lives in Arizona, USA. So let me introduce you to my good friend, Bjorgvin Benediktsson from Audio Issues.
Hello,
Mr. Benneticksson.
How are you doing, man? Good to
Pretty
see you.
good, you?
Good to be, yeah, great. I'm doing great.
Yeah, good to see you too, man.
It's a little early for me to start drinking, but I do have a non-alcoholic beer.
Now, okay, because I have my Bloody Caesar, as we have here in Canada. It's like a Bloody Mary, but it's made with clamato instead of tomato juice.
Yeah.
But the funny story is, I kind of messed up the time zone thing. You know, he's in Arizona, so we have like a 3-hour difference.
Yeah.
With the time zone, and I kind of reversed that over. So we agreed on meeting at 4:30 Pacific time, and I kind of so that means that's 1:30,
Right. We did it backwards.
Eastern time, so I just reversed it, and and send the thumbnail, the advertisement, sending an email 30 minutes prior to the stream, and then when I was sending the link to Bjorgvin, I said, oh, I think he mentioned 4:30 Pacific time. Oh, I'm kind of 6 hours earlier.
Yeah, but that's good, because at 4:30 I can just send them the replay and it'll be fine.
Exactly. There you go. So that's why it's a bit early for Bjorgvin.
Yeah.
Or in a happy hour,
Yeah.
Drinking beer and stuff. So.
Well, I mean, I do have a few select non-alcoholic beers in the fridge. I didn't know they were reserved for this occasion, but I definitely can take it.
You do. So, à ta santé.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of my people, my audience in the UK and Europe, they'll probably appreciate the early mix-up, because now it's really actually happy hour time for them there instead of middle of the night. So maybe they'll tune in. So
there you go. So anyways, what we're gonna do to start with, first of all, I want to welcome everyone that is right here watching the stream live. Click the like button, please. That is going to help us a lot. Check out Audio Issues. It's a blog, a website with the blogs on mixing, music production and stuff. Bjorgvin has been doing that, has been blogging for like 9 or 10 years or so, close to 10.
Yeah. Well, it's actually 12, but
oh wow.
Since 2008, so basically since I went to audio school in 2008, I've been writing about everything I've learned, and still writing about everything I've learned, and hopefully it is helpful to share with people, and it seems like it is, because people still keep buying the books and enrolling in the courses. So, and obviously coming to the website and becoming subscribers and downloading the cheat sheets and all that.
That's so cool. So he's actually the author of a step-by-step mixing. I'm gonna link.
I got my copy here.
Well, there you go. Did you read it?
I continuously refer to it, because sometimes it's similar to, sometimes I Google things to reference. I was like, how do you do X? And like one of my articles from 7 years pops up, and oh, thanks. So it's basically my brain in a book, and then Audio Issues is my extended library in the cloud, I guess.
Yeah, I think you're in a very good place when that happens, when you're looking for something online and your blog pops up,
Yeah. It's cool. Still a little bit frustrating, because you're like, I need more information. I don't need information that I already know. I need like a more elaborate explanation of like bit depth or sample rates or something that's way above my pay grade.
Now today, the thing I did a bit different from the last streams is that we are also streaming on Facebook, on top of YouTube. So, and I see that few people that are already commenting from Facebook. So welcome to all of you. So we're going to get to your questions. But first, I just want to go through today's topic, which is the mixing process, how we approach mixing, as far as I'm concerned, and also how Bjorgvin approaches mixing. So you want to start, Bjorgvin? What is your first step when you're going to start working on a mix?
Well, I mean, like, I mostly mix songs that are sent to me. So I usually get multi-tracks. I have a very extensive form that people fill out when they send me multi-tracks so that I get them in, you know, correctly labeled without any effects, unless the effects are like the production level effects that they are necessary, those sorts of things. So I end up basically with a zip file, and I import that into my mix template, and color coordinate everything, and then listen to the song. Super important part there. And you know, I arrange everything. I listen to the song, see if everything sounds good. If anything pops out that is either, you know, too quiet and level, I might raise the gain of that. If it's too loud, I might do some quick rough mixing just to get everything sounding so I can hear all the instruments, well, maybe not clearly, but they're all audible, so I can get a sense for what the song is supposed to be like, and just get a sense for the feel of the song and where things are, and what the arrangement is, and then whether or not any of that stuff needs muted or soloed or enhanced or multed, things of that nature. And then I will spend quite a bit of time mixing in mono on my mix cube, just doing levels and panning and EQ, and yes, EQ and compression and saturation. I use the Shep's Omni channel on most of my individual tracks to begin with. Sometimes I don't, if they're all sounding pretty good to be, and they don't need individual attention, or they're very complicated tracks that have a lot of guitars or a lot of keyboards, a lot of different things, I might simplify from the start, group them to my mix template. So I'll have like a kick, snare, a tom, overhead, and drum group, and like everything is routed to the drum group. And then I'll have a bass bus, like an acoustic guitar bus, an electric guitar bus, a keyboard bus, a piano bus, a vocal bus, and or a lead vocal bus, and a backing vocal bus, and then a solo bus. And then that's sort of a catch-all. Usually, like, there's not a lot more extra that I get sent. I usually work in predominantly instrument-based music, so I just sort of figure out where things go, that so that they can be simplified. I might need to rename some buses if we now have, you know, cello, like 4 cellos or something, then maybe the piano bus becomes the cello bus or something like that. And then I do continuous rebalancing of the faders throughout, and then I mix. I have all my plugins set up and all my effects buses and all my parallel chains already set up, so that it becomes mostly creative rather than problem solving.
Yeah. Okay. Now you just said a solo bus.
Yeah.
So what's that about?
Well, it's like the lead guitars or the keyboard solo or something that isn't the lead vocal, but will need individual attention because it is a solo instrument. And then obviously checking the phase of, you know, multi-mic'd sources, making sure that the drums are tight and are, you know, they follow the polarity with each other. Those sorts of things, obviously, I'll be looking for during the first, I don't know, 30 minutes.
That's cool. You know, it's pretty much close to what I do on my side. You know, I mixed a lot of albums that I didn't produce or record, but I actually did I went the other way around also, where I produced a bunch of albums and I recorded them and then mixed them also. So, but my approach is still the same, because even if I'm producing and recording a song that I'm going to mix, once I'm done with the recording, I commit to everything and just start a new session as far as the mixing session goes. So I never go and mix within the recording and production session. I always keep those two process separate. Right. For me, it makes way more sense. So I work with a mix template, which a lot of people from my audience already know, because I have a free mix Cubase template that I give away. So if you guys would love to download that template, I'm going to leave the link down below. Actually, the link is already down below if you want to take a look and download that for free. It's basically a routing template more than anything else.
So
just to
what's going on in that? What's like, is it how similar? I'm just curious about how you
yeah.
set.
But I start with I have like a separate stereo master bus,
Okay.
separate from my main Cubase master out. So it's I create my group channel track in Cubase, and I call this one stereo mix or stereo out, and this is going to be my main output. Then I create myself part of my template. I have like instrument buses, so I have one for the drums, one for all bass instruments, so that can be bass guitar or a synth bass, and I also have one for all guitars, acoustic or electric, so that's a main instrument out also. And I have one for keys, piano, all sorts of synths or strings or whatever. This will have its own bus also, and one last one for all vocals that I have also. And lately I've been trying the Shep's mixing rear bus technique. So it's in my template now.
Okay.
So it's part of the template. I use it on some occasion, So I did a mix lately where I used it a lot, and it worked out very well. But on some other type of music, more mellow type music and stuff, might work a bit, less to what I'm looking for. So I'm not going to use it then, but it's there. If I need it, it's there.
Yeah.
And this is, again, I'm going to leave the link down below if you want to know more about that technique. I don't want to go and dive into this right now. So this is basically the core of my template. And then I go down to all the instruments, and the drums will also have, all the drums will be routed into another main stereo bus for drums, because the main mixed drums, that can include percussions, loops, everything related to the rhythmic of the song.
Right.
So that's what this is how I'm going to use the main drum mix bus.
Right.
So I'm going to have one for the acoustic drums also. And then I go down from there. So if I have, even for electric guitars, if I have like stacked guitars, chances are I'm just going to group them all together into a bus, and that bus is going to go directly into the mix guitar bus.
It's so much easier. It makes it so much easier when you simplify everything down to sort of.
Oh, definitely. So in my template, I have all of my my buses set up, all of my effects also set up for the drums, for the effects that I'm used to work with, and so I can just route them over, and that's it. So the only thing I need to do is just to bring in the audio files, and
it makes for a crazy streamlined process, and you save so much time doing all this, because if you have it all set up, and I have a lot of parallel buses. I'm a big fan of Andrew Ships as well, and I do a lot of I have a lot of parallel processing going on throughout the mix. So like, as you say, like I have the drum bus, but then I have 4 parallel buses for drums, which is a snare stretch one, a drum reverb, a drum parallel compressor, and then now I added the drums dirt, which is I think an Andrew Sheps thing too.
Yeah, it is.
And I haven't experimented with that, but then I have a parallel bass track on top of the bass, and then I have like 3 parallel compressors running at all times, and then I just have 2 buses that are called wider and brighter.
Cool.
So it just has a stereo imager on one and a compressor. I think I have compressors on every bus, and then I have on brighter, I just have the Aphex Aural Exciter.
Okay.
To add that extra excitement to it, if necessary.
Yeah,
that's something
cool.
I'm experimenting with too. So
yes, something I want to point out though is on my side, anyways, all of my plugins, except for the buses and except for like the effects and stuff, the send effects, the channels will be muted every time I'm going to import a new song into my template. So now everything is routed to the right place, but all of those effects channels are just muted, and I can just fade them in and check what works or what doesn't, depending on the song I'm mixing. And same if I have like a chain of effects on my my vocal track, everything is bypassed to start with.
Right.
Because something that I like to do when I start a new mix from a new project, let's say I'm mixing a single from a client, I want to be able to do a static mix before starting to mix. I want to get an idea of what I'm dealing with as far as the song goes, and to find the correct vision to get a proper mix.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's just having everything set up and having everything like inserted, like even all the plugins too, not just the buses, because I have multiple types of plugins on every single channel, and they're more like the plugins that I know that I gravitate to all the time for specific instruments. Like there's a CLA 3A on the bass and the guitar bus because I know that I'll
Yeah.
probably use that compressor. There is always like a Pultec EQ and like an R bass on the kick drum. There is always a saturation plugin and an EQ on the parallel bass chain because I usually use it to get the bass to cut through on smaller speakers or in the mids. And then I always have just a bunch of random. There's one bus that's just called random, and
Cool.
and it just has like the stomp boxes and effects. So if I want to like add crazy effects, it has like the CLA effects plugin on there that's like just does crazy stuff. And then I have the Logic stomp box, guitar stomp box on there because you can add like fuzz, or if you want to put things through a guitar amp in parallel, that's often
Okay.
really great for vocals, for instance, to get sort of a low end growl without
Nice.
distorting the vocal.
Cool. That's pretty cool. Hey, Paul is asking just briefly. I just want to answer to Paul because he can't see the link that I was talking about to download the free mix template. Sorry about that. It's my bad. So I'm going to add it in a few minutes. Okay. So for now, let's continue. Gain staging is one of the next step that I also do before I do the static mix. I make sure that all the audio that I import into my mix session is well gain staged.
Okay. Yeah. So you don't, well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Do you try to keep the faders at 0 and you gain stage them so that they're like?
Yeah, I usually do. I actually go down a bit the unity point just to have a bit of headroom. I love having headroom because the resolution, when you look at a fader, there's way less resolution when we mix at the bottom of the fader. So yeah, I do so for sure.
Totally. Yeah. So I'll pull the faders down. I'll import all the tracks themselves. Then I'll pull them down just a little bit, just a few dB. And then I will often gain stage the waveforms in the arrangement window just with my eyes, because you can kind of tell like, oh, this needs to be louder. This is way too quiet. And you're trying to get that sort of uniform or
exactly.
like
Exactly.
at a healthy level. And then you can massage the faders in place.
So that's cool, and afterwards it's going to happen that maybe one or a couple of channels are going to have to be turned down quite a bit, and I don't mind that, but I just don't want to take any chances. I just make sure I gain stage properly, to get a lot of headroom. What do you do first? Do you work on your mix bus first, or you start with individual tracks?
I usually start with the loudest part of the song.
Yeah.
And I get a good level mix on all the instruments. And if it's too complicated, or if it's like there's too much going on, I might just start with the drums and then build from there. Oftentimes that will lead to the vocal not fitting anywhere, so I have to take that into consideration as well. But usually I like building the mix from the ground up, but just in the static mixing sense of the process. And then I will group or bus everything to my template, and then I will adjust the balance there. And from there, I'll do some mix bus processing, usually using saturation, some EQ, maybe some compression as well.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and then individual attention on the buses, and if on the group buses, and then if need be, I'll add individual EQs or compressors on the individual tracks themselves. But if the tracks are well recorded, they usually fit well if you just simplify the mix into its elements, because I'm mixing a song. I'm not mixing a bunch of tracks. Like, I want to feel the song. I want to hear the song. And because of that, you need to decide what is the most important part, how things are supposed to sound, what needs to be in the background. And obviously the vocal is always the most important part, and the drums are the most important foundation. And then you Lego from there.
Yeah, exactly. That's cool. Yeah, same, same here. I do a lot of work on the mix bus to start with once I have a good balanced mix. I say a lot of work. Um, I'm pretty gentle, I would say. I'm gonna start with some tape emulation, stuff like that, and you'll just add a bit of texture.
Yep.
But I will definitely, if I want to mix in a compressor and use a compressor or a limiter, I'm going to do it right off the bat. I'm going to set that up right away and work that out from the start. So I'm mixing in compression, and I decide how much dB of gain reduction I want to aim for, right away.
Right. And I didn't used to do this, but now I've started just leaving the limiter on ozone on, and it's just at -1 because that's where it's going to end, and then just mixing into it, and then just being cognizant about the amount of volume that's going into the mix bus overall.
Exactly.
And that's why I have a gain plugin at the top of the channel, so I can reduce the gain if it's getting too hot, because
because you're right. Doing so, you need to always pay attention.
Yeah.
Not to compress too much and not to limit too much.
Yeah. Because if you're like mixing and you're losing track of time, which is very, very often for me, I get into sort of a state of flow when I'm mixing, and it's a lot of fun. And sometimes I'm pushing things, I'm moving knobs, whatever, and the mix just keeps getting smaller and smaller. And it's basically just because everything's going hotter and hotter into a compressor that's just pushing back and making everything smaller and smaller. So always have your attention on the mix bus or whatever compressors at the end, whether it's a limiter.
Yeah, exactly. Same here. I start with the loudest part of the song, especially if we're talking about rock, pop, when there's a lot of energy going on with drum, bass, vocals. And I'm going to just set up my compressor or limiter right away with the loudest part of the song, and especially the drums. And I actually got that trick from on Lidge's podcast, and Lidge is here actually.
Yeah.
And good to see you, man. Lidge was on the live stream a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I was working on that one too.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, you jumped in at the beginning. And he actually had a guest on, and he made a course last week with Craig, and I forgot his last name. I don't know if you remember.
Craig Alvin.
There you go. And while listening to Lidge's podcast, that when he was interviewing Craig was sharing something that he does with the limiter, where he starts with the loudest part of the song with only the drums, and he gets a gain reduction of minus 6 dB at peaks only. So I kind of do the same thing, but maybe a bit less aggressive, as he does. And it does help, for me anyways, for this type of music, when we're talking about pop, rock, and, some stuff with a lot of energy, opposed to a folk quiet song, which is probably not very useful. But
so when it's the drums, so basically, so I'm thinking if you do the limiting just with the drums, because the kick and snare are probably going to be the loudest in the song, depending on the genre, of course.
Exactly.
But they are going to consistently always be the loudest parts.
Yeah.
So you can set your limiter without the rest of the song, as long as that's sort of the reference is the level of the kick and snare.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not super aggressive. I tend to go at maybe -4, -3 dB at peaks.
Yeah.
And that works for me pretty well. And the good thing is I know how that is going to sound after mastering. And I make all of my decisions, especially for the drums, as far as the snare and the kick goes. All of my compression decisions are going to be made according to what I'm hearing in the end right away. So then I'm going to mute that limiter. I'm going to keep it off when I'm going to bounce for the mastering.
Right.
And funny thing, my mix doesn't fall apart, in case someone is wondering. If you do so and you're going to mute the limiter, your mix risk of falling apart. And that is a risk for sure, but it didn't happen.
Right. Well, because if it's just limiting the peaks and just slightly,
I want to avoid getting the song back from mastering and say, man, it has a lack of punch. Where is all my snare and kick punch?
Yeah, right.
Well. So this is what I do, and then I go on individual tracks. I tend to leave the instrument buses alone as far as EQ and compression goes. I'm going to add a bit of console emulation and stuff like that, tape emulation, that I will do. The EQ is going to depend, if I need to EQ or not. Sometimes I'm going to EQ a bit right off the stereo bus, but a lot of times I'm just not going to do it and just fix that on individual tracks. It depends.
Right.
It depends how I feel.
Yeah. A lot of times I tend to do most of the processing on the buses, especially when it comes to gluing and taking that. If I think about it in an EQ way, I think, like, let's say the guitars, I just want the guitars to own 1K
Yeah.
in a way or whatever, right? And then the guitars will be pushed up there overall, and then the vocal maybe sits in 3K or something like that, and then the keyboard in 600 to 800 or whatever. And therefore I do most of the EQing and the processing and a lot of the sort of console plugins that add some character or whatever.
Yeah.
I put that on buses themselves. But a lot of times I'll use the individual tracks for more for sound design, or if I want a specific sound for just that one instrument, if I want a specific slap delay on that instrument, or the guitars are DI'd and need reamped, or the guitars don't sound as good as I want them to, I will use the opportunity to do more like sound design by putting amp sims and effects on the guitars to get a quote unquote sound as if I were recording it at the source.
Cool. That's great. You know what? Let's start by answering some questions.
Great.
Okay. I'm going to go with, because we've been here like for more than
27 minutes.
Yeah, so. Okay, so let's check on top. We have a lot of people here, 78 people so far. That's pretty cool.
Right.
Guys, please, if you can, hit the like button on Facebook and also on YouTube.
Yeah.
And follow Bjorgvin's YouTube channel and Facebook page.
Yeah, I have a 7-step mix translation cheat sheet at mixfinisher.com if anybody wants to check that out and isn't already on the email list, that is.
Okay, let's check with I think I had a couple of questions that I just saw. If you see one, let me know.
Let's go for well.
Okay, hello. Let's go with this one.
Yeah, that's the one I was gonna pick too.
Seriously. Awesome.
Yeah.
Hello, can you tell us a bit about what EQ plugins brands you both use?
Totally. So I use the PukeTech for the Pultec sound or whatever. It supposedly has a little more control in the low end. And I use that on low end stuff and on the mix bus and especially on kick. I use the FabFilter Pro Q3 for almost everything, especially when it comes to shaping and dialing in, like really getting surgical and stuff. And I love the dynamic EQ module. Shout out to Tim Mann, one of my Insiders members that introduced me to it, and to the point where I'm like, I need this EQ like yesterday. So I use that a lot. I use the stock EQ in Logic for filtering a lot. So mostly on my buses, there are filters already in place, and they're just using the stock EQ in Logic. I can't see why I would need a fancy EQ to filter out frequencies. Other notable EQs would be the VEQ from Waves. I use a lot.
Okay.
I really like that one. And then I use a lot of sort of the Signature series plugins, a lot of the CLA stuff, and then just the Pro Q3, honestly.
Nice.
Those are the biggest, probably the biggest like workhorses. I'll have and I'll have a lot of. I'm going through my template right now just to see if I'm catching everything. Oh, and then obviously the omni-channel. So Andrew Sheps' omni-channel from Waves, I use that EQ a lot.
Okay,
and it's
that's a good channel strip.
yeah, it's
I have to say.
so good. It's one of my favorite plugins by far,
Yeah.
especially because they have that little insert slot on it, so I can add like a delay or a reverb as an insert. So I just pull the dry knob or the
Yeah,
wet
that's
knob
very
down,
cool.
and it gives that like tiny bit of micro space to that one instrument.
Yeah.
You get now you're starting to place instruments in the like on a chessboard. Yeah, so those are mine. I'd love to know what
That's
yours
cool.
are.
Yeah, the Pro Q3, of
Yeah,
course, it's a classic as far as I'm concerned.
yeah,
And I love to do some correction, EQ correction with it. It's very surgical if you
yeah,
need to. It works very well. I high pass and low pass with it also, but I do use the filtering out of Cubase. Every channel has a pre-filtering section where you can just high pass and low pass everything before hitting the plugins. So I'm going to use that a lot if I need to just filter out some frequencies also. And then Paul Tag, the one from UAD,
yeah,
the
yeah. I
classic
have that
one,
one as well.
I do use it. And lately I've been using the Stam Audio. It's a hardware though; it's not a plugin, but it's similar to a Paul Tech.
Okay,
It sounds pretty good. It's you just need to get out of your DAW to get into it. But
right.
it has pros and cons of using hardware, but I'm not moving around, so it's good for me.
Right.
But it sounds pretty sweet, though. I have
Yeah.
to say, I'm actually going to make a video on that soon enough. So that I'm going to use if I need to. There's a cool plugin that I like to use on. And that is going to depend on the situation. That's going to work well on the bus or on maybe a source that is a bit that gives me a bit of problem. It's
Yeah.
the Goldfoss EQ,
Oh yeah.
that intelligent type of EQ thing.
Yeah.
I
I'm
kind of
very
like that.
I'm very familiar with it, and
Yeah,
excuse me, it's pronounced Gutfoss. It's an Icelandic
yeah. That's
waterfall.
sorry, man.
uh,
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, you know more about that than me.
well, yeah, no, it's just it was. I was pleasantly surprised by the name of the plugin when I was at NAMM a few years ago. I was like, wait, what? What this Gudfoss is like one of the most famous waterfalls in Iceland. If you go as a tourist to Iceland, you go to that waterfall. It's like the first.
Yeah, that's
It's
what I heard.
top 3 stops, right?
Okay, so pronounce it again for me.
Gudfoss. So when you pronounce double L's, you kind of have to spit in your mouth a little bit.
Nice.
Yeah.
So all that to say that it's a cool plugin.
Yeah, no, it's great. I have it on my mix bus as well.
And
It's
it's
sort of
also
in the I have my sort of collection of mix bus plugins, and then I
Yeah.
have a few empty slots, and then I have a few quote unquote mastering plugins. If I'm mastering the single
Mhm.
or sending them a mastered version, I have Gudfoss right there
Yeah, that's cool.
above the ozone. And then
I like
as for EQ too, I do have a lot of the channel strips. So the TG Art 1 2 3 4 5 Abbey Road one has an EQ, but I
okay.
use it more for color than as an EQ.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I like to work also with the Neve UAD plugins.
Okay.
The 10, is it a 1080 something, and the 1073.
Yeah.
The high frequency is sounds pretty good on
Cool.
those, and also the Kush Clariphonics. I really like this one.
Oh, really?
This is kind of a parallel EQ type of thing. It's just if I need to add a bit more brightness to a sound, just in general. It's mainly going to be useful on a bus, or sometimes a vocal is going to benefit of that. If need. I don't do that a lot on vocals, but on the mix bus or sometimes on an instrument bus, that can work pretty well. Yeah. So it doesn't sound harsh as well. So it's pretty smooth and it's pretty nice. So this is basically what I use as far as EQ goes. And channel strips, of course. I like the Andrew Sheps. I worked with it quite a few times, and this is the kind of plugin I need to work with more.
Yeah. It's
It has
super
a,
powerful. I really
yeah,
like the de-essing modules because they're basically
yeah.
two multi-band compressors.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
And apart from that, the BrainWorks Console G that I worked a lot with.
Okay. Cool.
All right, so let's continue. What? Okay, there's one here for me. Okay, I am in the process of building a template using 0G Ethera products. How many group buses should I include? I have around 10 so far now. I would love to help, but I know nothing about 0G Ethera. What about you? You heard about the?
I don't know what that is.
Shoot,
Uh,
you. Sorry.
I have 35 parallel buses. That might seem a little extensive, but no, well, let's say they're not parallel. Some are groups, but I definitely have, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I have 18 parallel buses and then some groups.
Cool.
So it's all just like four things that I think needs it. That's why my parallel buses are called like wider or
Yeah, yeah.
or
But
brighter.
it doesn't mean you're going to use them all.
No, it does. No, not at all. Sometimes,
exactly.
sometimes most of them go untouched. Not most of them, but a lot. They don't always get used. There's not always a reason to crush the drums or.
No, exactly. But everything is there if you need it. That's the
Right.
beauty of a template.
Yeah.
Country T. When you use your mix template, how do you all the tracks load? Okay, how do you all the tracks load into the session?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Like in Cubase, there's several ways that I can manage that. Sometimes, like lately, a client sent me Cubase sessions ready to be mixed.
Right.
So what I did, I just loaded myself my template, and I imported all of the tracks of that recording session directly into my session. This is something we can do in Cubase, like in Pro Tools, I think.
Yeah,
And
you definitely can do that in Pro Tools.
Yeah, import track from projects, and I just import those tracks in, and I
Yeah.
just move all the events into the correct channels, and that's it, And this is how I'm going to import my tracks into a template when I start from scratch. And also because there's two things, there's one template that I use when I start to mix a song from scratch, but there's also a template that I'm going to create afterwards when I'm mixing a full album. So I'm going to start with that first song, the single usually that the artist wants to get out ASAP.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to use that, once we're happy with this mix and the sound of the song, I'm going to keep that. I'm going to create a new template for this project only to keep, in the case where, which is always mostly the case anyways, where the all the following songs, all the songs of the album will have the same sound basically, and same vibe, same genre and same everything. So in this case, I'm just going to use the same, create a new template out of that song and just import those tracks afterwards. And so all the first steps with the static mix and stuff, I'm going to have to skip that at this point because it's not the same process in that situation.
Right. Yeah. For me, I just import them. I just usually import the tracks themselves into the Logic template and then go from there. And then I'll do mixing on the rough tracks or on the tracks themselves on the recordings, and then I'll bus them all to the groups that are then connected to the parallel buses that are connected to the mix bus.
Cool. So there you go. Not that complicated. Mike C. In orchestral cinematic music mastering, it is different from pop and rock. How do you get a volume level and punch without much compression? Or should I be considered about a higher volume? Yeah, it is quite different for sure.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with orchestral music in that sense. I've only done one symphony recording, an 80 piece symphony recording that I mixed and mastered, and I was very careful about adding compression. I wanted it to just sound. It's rather doing sort of volume writing than trying to raise the volume with compression, because you want to keep those dynamics as clean as possible.
Classical music, it's very very dynamic, and you need to keep it that way.
Yeah.
I fully agree with you. Less compression, and a lot of writing and a lot of automation at this point. And keeping dynamics, especially in cinematic and orchestral music. I don't think, anyway, I didn't mix a lot of those, to be honest with you. But I don't think it needs to be always at the same level with, with all sections of the song. So good dynamics is okay.
Yeah.
In this case, I assume.
Right.
Good question, though. Okay, there you go. Felipe question: is there a place to download good reference mixes to compare to in reference to our project? Now he's probably talking about reference like mixing version of a song without before hitting the mastering stage.
Right. So actually, there is so Mike Senior, author of Recording Secrets for the Small Studio and Mixing Secrets for the Small Studio, is a good friend of mine. He has the best resource for multi-tracks for practice on his Cambridge MT site. Literally, if you Google multi-track library, his site will pop up. But a new thing that he did, sort of in a little bit of a collaboration with our friend Ian Shepard, he has a mastering library to practice mastering, but there's no saying you can't practice referencing your mixes to unmastered mixes.
Exactly.
Those tracks. It could go both ways. You could use it as mastering practice, or you could use it as a good barometer of good sounding mixes before mastering.
That's cool. I'm going to leave the link in the description down below after the stream, because it is a very good resource website. Then let's go to Stereotactic music, clipper saturation, or compressor limiter for mixing track by track.
Both. I use both. I use saturation and compression on probably almost every track. Maybe less saturation overall. Depends on the track, of course. But always a compressor of some sort most of the time. If only for color, if you can get away with it. But usually I don't use a lot of limiting. I've yet to learn the ways of mixing with limiters. I really only use them for mastering. I do, I understand how they work and I know what to use them for, but
how to apply them track by track.
I can't see why I can't just use a compressor.
Yeah. Same here. I use both. I don't think it's one or the other. Saturation is powerful. It's a very cool tool to use. I remember when I first started to mix, it's something that I ignore way too much, and now it's like it's everywhere. Even if it's a tiny bit of saturation that you don't even hear, if you mute it, you're gonna miss something in the mix.
Yeah, it just like takes some of the. Well, I mean, it does take the harmonic distortion away, which is what saturation is.
Exactly.
But even though you can't necessarily hear the harmonic distortion, nor do you want to necessarily, because I wouldn't necessarily want to solo it. But
no, exactly.
But it definitely is audible, or it's felt when it's muted or when it's
So I use both. Compression. Compression depends. If I need it. If the signal needs to be compressed, I'm going to compress it. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Usually, like electric guitars.
Yeah.
Sometimes I will because I want that tone. Yeah. But a lot of times, especially like huge stacked guitars and stuff, they're already compressed. That's the sound.
Yeah, the waveforms are just straight across. Then you're just using compression for color.
Yeah, exactly. So, good question. Let's continue a bit. Let's go with we're talking about the most important instrument you start mixing with. You covered that a bit before.
Yeah.
Let's talk more about that.
Okay. Well, so I mean, if it is a full band mix, I tend to start at the bottom and work my way up. So that's drums, bass, guitars, vocals, or something like that. Sometimes it's the most important instrument is maybe the driving acoustic guitar. You think about something that's like a Mumford and Sons sort of sort of angry bastard music. That's just
Hmm.
you know, a kick drum and a strumming guitar and a lot of like oohs and yelling.
Yeah,
It's a terrible description of Mumford and
it
Sons.
is.
But then I kind of want to get that guitar sounding really, really powerful and really strummy and cutting through, and then adding the vocal on that. It's really just listening to the song, figuring out who are the main characters
Yeah,
in the play. You know, if every band is the Justice League, who's Batman, who's Superman, and who's Wonder Woman, because that's the Trinity, right? And
exactly.
so those are the most important characters.
Nice.
And then Flash comes in for the solo.
I like that. Yeah, you know, same here. Usually drums are going to be the instrument I'm going to start with, especially when I'm mixing, you know, rock and pop rock, where the drums usually are way up front in the mix anyway. So
Yeah.
I'm going to start with those, bass, but I always going to bring the vocal very early in the mix, even
Yeah.
if it's not fully mixed.
Right. And that's why it's good to get a rough balance across the
Yeah,
board before you start
exactly.
muting everything. I would, you know, it's better to know exactly. I like this vocal needs to fit here. There's tons of other shit going on. Let's make sure that I know exactly where it's supposed to sit before I mix over it accidentally.
And this is something that I like about the template I work with, because all the buses before hitting the stereo bus are all instrument buses. So for me, it's
Yeah.
very easy to just mute them all, keep the
Yeah.
drums alive, and I want to hear the vocals, unmute. All right.
Yeah.
Mute the bass, unmute the bass right away. And in my session, that part of the mix console is static on the right side. So it's not moving. So even if I move my console around, this is going to stay put.
Gotcha.
Which is quite cool. With it's a feature that Cubase has.
Yeah.
By the way, Bjorgvin works with Logic. Which version you're working with?
I think I just got a forced update, so whatever's the recent one.
Okay, it's Apple, a fourth update. I like that.
Yeah, it's Logic Pro X. Whatever version of that is the newest. And it's interesting to talk about sort of. Now I lost my train of thought. You were saying something, and whatever. It's gone now.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Guys,
Yes,
go
I
ahead.
do. So it's great for like having those buses and those groups, because then you're like muting, you're just soloing the drums, and then you're like, let's see how that is with the vocal. It's really great to use that when you're troubleshooting. Maybe you're like, hey, why is the mix all of a sudden muddy? Then you're muting things until you're like, oh, it's the random low end of the keyboard when it's in the chorus, because he like hammers on the low notes or something like
Mhm.
that, right? And then it's like that's making the mix muddy. So selective muting as a way of troubleshooting what's wrong is great thing to do too.
Then we have once you're ready to work on an individual track, you're gonna start with what? What's
Uh,
gonna be your chain usually?
what start with what, or start on plugin wise?
Yeah, plugin wise, yeah.
I'll usually, if it just needs a little bit of EQ, I might just maybe it just needs like a boost in you know, whatever 500 or something. I'll just add an EQ. Sometimes it's just a stock EQ. But often the Shep's channel is on there already.
Mhm.
Or the Fab filter. Maybe if I'm troubleshooting something and it's ringing or whatever, I'll use the Pro Q3 to find the resonant frequency, and then I'll cut that. Usually there's not a ton going on the individual channels, maybe an EQ here and there. And then of
Yeah,
course,
'cause you did a lot of
mic
work on
stuff.
the mixed buses.
Yeah, I do most of the mixing
That's
on the
cool.
buses. So on the mix bus themselves, so like on the drum bus, I have the Vitamin, I have a C4, I have a UAD channel strip, I have the CLA Mixdown that I'm trying to fit somewhere in the template. On the bass, I have three different amp sims that I change back and forth depending on which sound I'm going for and what the track is requiring. I have an R bass and a C4, which is a multi-band compressor. CLA 3A, and then I have just a stock compressor that I use if I need to sidechain the bass to the kick. And then I have sort of signature plugins, sort of like the CLA Unplugged on acoustic guitar, and then the TG 1 2 3 4 5, the Abbey Road one, and then some amp sims, and then on keys and synths I'll have Vitamin, I'll have a the Waves V comp,
Okay.
and then on the lead vocals I'll have the RVox, the VEQ, the CLA vocals, the Pro Q, the Pro DS from FabFilter. I'll have the Greg Wells Voice Centric, which is a great sort of you know, activate great vocal sound mode, I guess.
Nice.
And then I have Nectar from Isotope that I haven't truly found a way to use.
I heard a lot of good stuff. Never tried it, but heard a
Yeah.
lot of good stuff.
Yeah. So I just have all these plugins set up and they're there, and then I'll activate, deactivate depending on what I'm in the mood for.
Okay.
And obviously what the song is saying.
Do you EQ before compressing or vice versa or both?
Probably both, because I'll probably try to EQ and troubleshoot before, and then I may add a compressor afterwards. But then maybe that compressor is compressing away too much of something that I want. Then I'll add an EQ after to compensate for that. But then that track also goes into a parallel chain that has a compressor that also has an EQ after it. So yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, both.
Exactly. Yeah, same here. And I'm a big fan of parallel processing as well.
Yeah.
When it comes to compression, and especially on drums and vocals.
Right.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go with we got an answer from saying that 0G Ethera Go 2, you must have a look. It's fantastic. Yeah, well, I'll take note.
Cool.
Then okay, let's go with that's another very good one. Mike C, do you approach mastering in different ways for online music and CDs? It's there's a slight difference, I would say yes and no. Yes, in the sense that the output of the limiter is going to be, I would say less than on a CD. It's on a CD, you can set that up to
minus 0.3,
minus 0.3 or something like that,
Yeah. And then always -1,
and sometimes even -2 according to Spotify.
Oh, really?
Bah, it depends. I guess -1 is pretty good.
Yeah.
So that would be the main difference between the two, and the loudness also. You have to consider loudness that is going to be brought down with streaming services.
Right.
So that's an entire other topic that our good friend Ian Shepherd covered very well.
Very well. His plugins are all over my meter.
Oh yeah.
So I have the dynameter. I have the loudness penalty plugin, which is great, which tells you whether your mix is going to be turned down.
Oh yeah, that's a very cool plugin.
And then I have the perception plugin that tells me whether my mix bus and mastering bus chain is making my mix sound better or just louder.
I'll have to make a video on that, because I work with those a lot when mastering. So they are fantastic tools. So that would be the main difference, I would say. Then favorite drum replacement kits. You have to watch my last live stream I did with Matt Woodrow. The topic was on drum replacement, actually. So go watch this video. You're gonna like it. What about you, Bjorgvin?
I use Drumagog. That's the only one I got.
Okay.
And it's been working out fine. They have a lot of different kits.
Yeah.
So I just have the entire library downloaded, and I have some favorites so that because I don't really want to go through every single kick sample every time, and I'd really rather use the actual kick recording, but that's why I've gone through them, and whenever I go through them and I was like, oh, this kick sounds good, maybe not for this song, but I'll add it to favorites.
That's cool. On my side, I like to work with, but Cubase has a very good system if you want to sound replace your snare or kick. That works pretty well. But I actually use a trigger 2 from Slate
Oh yeah.
a lot to sound replace my snares and toms, kicks when I need to. As far as sample goes, if I look at samples, now I really like a company called That Sound. They have those amazing samples, drum samples. That sounds super amazing. I just love what they do, and so I use them a lot. This is going to be the main drum library I'm going to use when I am drum replacing a sound. And of course, I create my own samples. I record my own drum samples every time I do a drum recording here at the studio, whether it's me playing or another drummer playing. When I have a good recording going on, I'm just going to sample the drums right away for the project. That's going to help me throughout the mix. If I need to just patch a few things, I'm going to use the same snare and same kick and whatever needs to be patched up. And this is going to be very practical in this way, but also I'm keeping those as samples that I can use on other projects. Because something I like to do when sampling drums, acoustic drums, is to use an unprocessed sample. Instead of a full already processed. Sometimes the full processed sound is going to work well for the mix, so it's going to depend, but most of the time I'm going to aim for the unprocessed version of that sound. And the down sound, that sound library will give me all of those, the full process and also the dry and unprocessed sound. And when I do use my own recordings as samples, I'm using, of course, the unprocessed sound.
Cool.
All right. So do you have any favorites? I think we covered in part that earlier with EQ. But let's go with compression then. Do you have any favorite compressor, compression limiter equalization plugins at the moment for singer-songwriter type tracks? So it's a very specific genre.
Well, I really like the RVox. It's beautiful in its simplicity because there's only one thing you can do, and it's pull the slider down. And it'll compress the vocal. I use the LA2A and 1176 from Waves. I use the CLA3A, from the LA2A and 1176 from UAD, and the CLA3A from Waves. I don't have, let's see, I have the C4. Oh, the MV2 is great for drums. I have it permanently on my snare.
Okay.
And because it lifts the lower signal of something, does some magic there. So it's just like, it's like a magic thickener in a way without maybe crushing the dynamics. So that one's great. And as far as compressors on the mix, I don't actually have any. I just have the Ozone compressor on there. But then just the stock compressors in Logic are great, and that's about it. Then just the compressors in the Omnichannel I use a lot. Everything's always on there, and then C4 for multiband compression, and that is about. And the V comp I have on occasion. V comp's great for keyboards for some reason. I feel like it just brings the mids, because I usually tend to put keys in between the bass and the lows, the guitars in the high mids. I tend to put keys in the middle, and it just sort of pushes that mid range in a weird way. So
okay, cool.
Use that.
On my side, the classic combination of 1176 and LA2A for vocals that I use a lot. The UAD version that I like to work with. Also, the vintage compressor in Cubase and the tube compressor also are very good compressors. MV2, I like it a lot, but I do use it on vocals.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I love it on
vocals. Tried it.
And it's a bit similar to RVox in a way.
Okay. Yeah.
As far as the compression goes.
Right.
But instead of a gate, now you have the low level coming up. So for an acoustic type song, that can be pretty cool.
Yeah. Very cool.
If you don't overuse it. So those are very good, and RVox, of course. RVox has the gate, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. Yeah, that I probably almost never use.
Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah,
never
no,
get
really, I actually don't use gates overall that much unless the drums are really giving me problems.
Yeah, same here. Sometimes, if I have some big, huge problems on the kick, with the snare, I might use a gate. But for toms, I do everything manually.
Okay. Yeah.
In Cubase, chopping everything up. Actually, I don't keep only the hits, but I just tame down everything else.
Right.
So I
Okay.
slice everything into their own events, and I just group and all together everything that is not toms, and I just
Right.
bring that down.
Right.
And that's it. So I keep a bit of the signal
Right.
of the microphone.
And then I mean, I do use like the CLA vocals and the CLA guitars a lot. And I don't know what compressors those are. Like they're probably versions of whatever,
Yeah.
I'm sure the CLA guitar plugin is an LA3A, and I'm sure
Mhm.
that the CLA vocals has some combination of 1176 or LA2A, or FET, VCA,
Yeah.
Opto, whatever. So
I have to point out the arouser is one of my favorite compressors.
okay,
It's like a distressor, basically.
yeah, very cool.
It has also that distortion, saturation that you can add on the compressed signal. I kind of like what it does.
Cool. Yeah.
And also the Pro C 2, I think is. Yeah, I don't use it a lot, but if I had only one compressor to choose from
Right.
that can do a lot of things, I think the FabFilter Pro C
Yeah.
is a good choice.
It's I don't use it anymore. It's super good. In my mixing with 5 plugins course, I use the Pro C for everything because it's also such a good teaching tool.
Yeah.
Um, but then I updated my computer and then it wouldn't install, and then they upgraded to Pro C 2, and I didn't want to upgrade to that, so I never got around to it. But
That's funny. And okay, what about
so FabFilter, if you're listening, I would like the Pro C 2 to replace the Pro C I
exactly.
bought. Not
Send
the
Bjorgvin an NFR, please. Frederick, what's your favorite drum VST instrument for getting away from mixing, but when you do some music production, Bjorgvin, what do you like to work with?
I hardly ever use any drum VSTs. I know that my students really like Easy Drummer, and what it's called, just Virtual Drummer.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then the drummer in Logic is good, but I hardly do any production. I mostly do mixing and mix teaching and coaching. So I tend to not have a ton of experience programming drums, even though it seems like an incredible skill to have, because when my students send me songs that they have programmed all the drums for, I cannot tell the difference.
Same here. I don't use them a lot. I use them when I do pre-prod, when I'm working on a new song and I just want to have a drum take, a drum recording. I'm just going to use with that sound, the sound library I was talking about earlier. It's a virtual drums as well. They have like presets for battery from Native Instrument, and I have complete. So I use the battery a drum sample VST and load those presets in it. So this is going to be my main drums, but also Groove Agent in part of Cubase is a great drum VST instrument, and they also have several different drum libraries you can buy as extra libraries also. And this is actually a tool that I need to dive into way more than what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
It is a lot of stuff you can do with the Groove Agent. So I would say, as far as my favorite drum VST instrument, Groove Agent would be the number one. As far as samples,
Yeah.
I would go with that sound. So I wish that sound had some presets for Groove Agent.
Cool.
And then let's go with I just saw one that yes, I read that, but I just can't find it. But
You got a lot of comments here. You're super popular.
look at that. That's because you're on.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
Ron Bruyette, do you guys use reference track for mixing? I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I don't overdo it, but I do. I have my my stuff, my tracks that I use for reference my mix, just to make sure I'm in the. It's mainly for the tone, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's kind of a hassle. Like I have some CDs here, but I didn't bring my CD collection with me from Iceland 10 years ago. So I'm limited in the reference tracks that I have. I know that I could download the FLAC and stuff like that, but I do have some reference tracks already just on a flash drive that I use that are high quality waves. But then I also have some MP3s of songs that I just like the balance of, and I don't entirely buy into the notion that you need 1411 kilobytes per second to gauge where the snare drum is in the mix.
Mhm.
I think you can
I agree.
do that through just listening to the music on Spotify. If you put it on 320 kilobytes per second, which is the high quality listening stream. Obviously, if you don't have unlimited data, that's not a good idea because you'll burn through your data immediately. But so I do that, and so I listen for sort of, so when people send me like I want it to sound like this or that, I listen to the sort of composition and like the placement of the instruments, and then I just try to match that, and then I might use some other tracks for just overall frequency balance.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, but I tend to go for I try to get as flat of a frequency balance as possible, just so that it translates as best as it can to other speakers.
Yeah, and it's important to use reference mixes that you know well, that you're very familiar with.
Yeah.
Also, something that I do, when I'm mixing a full album, after mixing the first song that everyone is happy with, I'm going to use that as my reference for the rest of the songs. So it's
Right.
going to be on on the following projects, Cubase projects.
Right. And
I can always get back to it. Okay, so that was a good mix. So let's get, in the same area.
right. Yeah, and rough mixes from bands are pretty good because you not only get sort of where they want the song to be, and if that is a good overall balance, you can follow that even if it's maybe not a great mix. And it's also sometimes just an easy mix to beat. So I tend to have it in the session. So at the end of the mix, I can be like, I can level match the two songs and
Yeah.
go, and like I need to make sure that my mix sounds at least better than theirs. Uh,
And also using, because I know that a lot of people ask me about how do you use a reference track that has been mastered already when you're mixing and you're not mastering.
right,
Um, you know, to answer that, I would say that I'm not gonna focus on the loudness of that track, when I'm mixing. I'm
right,
more gonna focus on the tone, and I'm also gonna take into consideration that after the track has been mastered, chances are that the mastering engineer tweaked a bit of the tone as well.
right.
So it gives me a bit of a kind of a buffer, I would say.
Yeah. And like when you have mastered mixes, just make sure that you level match them because otherwise
Yeah,
it's almost
definitely.
impossible to gauge between them because your mix is always going to be quieter and it's always going to sound worse. So
And there's some plugins that you can use to load reference tracks that will level match with your session.
right, right.
I worked with one called Magic AB,
Okay,
and they don't do it anymore,
right. Oh, okay.
unfortunately. But there's another one called Reference, I think, that
Yeah,
I'm
I think
familiar
so.
with. I heard it's pretty good.
Cool.
Then we have the, do you finalize your mix and say that's it through speakers or headphone, or and if so, what sort do you rely on?
So I have so my 7-step mix translation process, that is the mix translation cheat sheet that I talk about in step-by-step mixing, is for free for at mixfinisher.com.
I'm gonna
But
leave the link below.
yeah, yeah, and then but it's seemingly so popular that some poster company actually swiped the entire copy and put it on a poster and sold it. So So I'm not getting any royalties from that.
That's too bad for you, man.
But flattering anyway. So I do. So it's it's easy for me to remember. It's mixing in mono, mixing in stereo on bigger speakers, bouncing it out, listening to it on earbuds, take the dog for a walk. Sometimes I listen on just like the actual iPhone, which is a terrible speaker if you want to talk about like. But if you're like, oh, okay, I can hear the bass and the vocals don't sound drowned out and it's not too harsh, at least like it's like a good gauge for a really, really bad bad sounding speaker. But it's you imagine that you're one of the kids on the subway listening to mixes and listening to the music out loud, annoying everybody else in the car. And that your music needs to sound good through that too. And then get feedback, whether it's from peers or the client, and then revise. And maybe you have to do that entire process over again, but maybe it sounds good on your speakers, and you just need minor mix revision tweaks from the artist. I'm lucky enough to have 3 sets of monitors in here, and I use SonarWorks reference to balance my speakers so that they are as flat as possible, based on the acoustics of this room. And so that's my process basically.
Okay. Same here. I mix with my main monitors, which are Focal's Solo 6 BE. And then when I'm near the end of the mix, I switch to the Kelly Audio 3-way IN8 monitors, which sound very good. I do use reference 4 also from SonarWorks.
Yeah.
And I use a pair of there you go, Biodynamics. These are the DT770.
Yeah.
I don't use SonarWorks with my headphones. It's something I just don't like to do.
Yeah.
Just because I don't want to be slave to it. Because I'm going to use those headphones to just listen to music outside the studio, so I don't want to be.
Yeah, I switch it on and off. So I took it off. It would like activate when the computer booted up.
Okay.
And I didn't really need it to be running in the background, and it would screw with every other audio driver. So now I just have it on my mix template, and then I just activate it for the speakers. And it has a profile for my speakers, which I have like the super hyped Sony MDR 7506.
Oh yeah, the classic one. Yeah, I have those too. I can't stand them.
Yeah, they're like all low end, ton of highs.
But you know that Andrew Sheps mixes with those.
I know. It's really
without SonarWorks.
Yeah. He just puts things in parallel and everything comes out great.
There you go, man. It works.
Yeah, man. Yeah, so that's sort of the translation process.
And that's cool. And I also have those Auratone types speakers. I have those as well.
I have one of those. I only have one, and so I always have to flip everything into mono if I want to listen.
Oh, yeah, you were saying that earlier.
But that's just how it is. And
it's funny because I don't mix a lot in mono. It's something I just don't do. No, I check in mono. I'm gonna check, if I have like any phase problems and stuff. But as far as balance goes, if I switch to mono, I want to hear what's in the middle louder than anything else.
Right.
Basically, so I don't care if I don't hear the guitars as much as my vocals because it's in mono. I need to hear what's in the middle first.
Right.
Those need to be up front. But I just make sure that everything is in phase. I would say that's the only thing I'm going to do when I just check in mono. But I don't like mix in mono much. Right. Maybe I should. I don't know. Maybe I should try it more.
Yeah, well, it works well for me. So it's not great. It's not not fun. Like everything always sounds like kind of shitty. But it's like running with weights, It gets you there kind of fast.
Then Kevin, he's not asking a question, but he say that it's his first time here on the live chat, but he always watched my videos. Rock on, Kevin. Thank you for being here. You rock. Then we have. Let me check here. What about this Mixdown? Okay, great choice in your headphones. I got no room. I got no room in my tiny trailer home for speakers. Okay, just a comment. I thought it was a question. And what about this one? How does your hat affect your mix reference? Can you mix without it? I can. I will. What about that?
Yeah. It's not a magic hat, right?
It's not. Actually, no, this one is the Mixdown one, so it has a bit of magic to it.
Yeah, for sure. Sentimental value, if you will.
You what?
Sentimental value, if you will.
There you go. Okay, I have to point out something that for me is like super important in the mix, in my mixing process, and pretty sure it's the same for you, and it's automation.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most important thing in the mix.
Yeah.
How do you work that out? When do you start automating your mix, and what's your process?
I tend to do mostly just volume automation, and I tend to do it towards the end. I am trying to incorporate the new process of doing volume automation at the very beginning, like before almost anything else, because sometimes things need to pop up a little bit here in the fill or whatever. And sometimes if there are very explicit breaks in parts, so like a verse and a pre-chorus or a chorus or whatever, I may just turn the gain down of a specific part. So instead of doing volume, I'll just clip gain it down.
On my end, I'm gonna do a lot of clip gain for vocals.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the, anything that is pre-inserts. That I'm gonna do before anything else,
Right.
before hitting compressor and everything, just especially for vocals.
Right.
That I will do clip gaining, or just automating the gain, or using a plugin like the Waves vocal writer.
Yeah.
If I use vocal writer, I made a video on that maybe a month or two ago, and when I use it before as a pre-gain leveler, I would say.
Okay.
More than afterwards. Afterwards I'm going to do everything myself without the use of a plugin. But everything else is going to be done near the end of the mix, or when I feel like it. When I feel it's time to automate something, I'm just going to do it right away.
Totally.
But it does add a lot to a mix.
Right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So one of the things that now I'm getting back into, because I remember, so I started out in live sound, so I've always had my fingers on the faders, and now I'm kind of missing that, because I was watching videos with like Michael Brower. He was like riding the faders of the vocal delay and stuff like that, and I'm like, you can't really do that with a mouse. So I'm looking into, maybe getting an X Touch or one of the PreSonus fader ports, or what? Which one is that one?
That's the fader port 16.
Oh yeah, that's the one I'll probably gonna get, because
I love it.
Because if I could just balance using using the faders, it would make it more fun. It'd make it probably faster and easier. And your automation game increases 10 times as much, because you're going to be able to ride compression, you're going to be able to ride vocal delays, effects, all this sort of stuff. And it's just that's what I used to do when I was doing live sound. I knew the band so well because they were always coming back, because I was the in-house live engineer, or I would do shows with bands that I already knew really well. And I knew exactly when the scream was going to happen, so I could push the delay up all the way so it blew them out of the speakers. And so that's maybe the one thing, or one of the things that is kind of missing from my process.
Yeah, automation is my friend, especially with the fader port 16. And the integration with Cubase is quite well done. I made 2 videos on that actually. So if you Cubase users want to know more about the fader port 16 in Cubase, check out those videos, because PreSonus is the one that makes the fader port, and it's mainly made the integration with Studio One is like stunning for sure. It's the same company, it's normal, and I know that the integration with Logic seems to be very nice as well.
Yeah, I hope.
But yeah, for sure you're gonna like it if you can put your hands on one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do a lot of I automate everything. Sometimes even EQ. Sometimes I can use a dynamic EQ to tame down one frequency on one part of a song, but sometimes just this morning I was sending a mix to my client, and he came back to me and said, yeah, okay, can you just tone down the guitar solo at just during that part, so yeah, sure, so I tamed the volume down, but also I just automated the EQ at this point because it was just a bit aggressive.
Right.
And EQ is volume. It's just volume frequencies. It's the same thing.
Frequency specific volume. Yeah.
That's it. You just bring down that specific frequency that bugs you, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I can automate that. Automate some saturation if I need to. Some reverb, delay. A bunch of stuff you can automate. Not only faders.
Right.
But it does add a lot to my mixes for sure.
Yeah, I might have to buy that.
Yeah, you have to. There's a bit of a learning curve depending on the integration you're gonna have to deal with Logic. But yeah, I do use it with plugins as well. Sense is pretty cool to automate instead of using the mouse.
Right.
All right. So now we also have. I saw a question, but I just lost it.
Let's see here. Ron Bruyette, if that is how you pronounce his name, he says testing the mix in the car is what really tells me what the mix needs, and that's super super common. I don't tend to do that a lot because it's too much of a hassle for me.
Yeah, same here because I don't drive my car a lot. I'm always here in the studio, so I don't. But a lot of people do. This is an environment that they're used to. And that's why it's a good reference point for them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I just found it. It's about I just saw it's about VCA. There you go. I think that's the one. What are the advantages of VCA faders in mixing? Yeah, that when I need a VCA fader, I'm going to use one. For example, okay, let's say I have a bunch of kick drums, okay, that I'm using, like kick in, kick out, and a sub kick. I'm going to route those into a bus, a kick bus. And let's say I'm using a sample on top of that, and the sample I'm using is a full processed sample. I'm not going to route this one into the kick bus. All of those, the kick bus and that sample track is going to go directly in the drum mix bus channel. But if I want just to keep the relative volume of all those tracks together, if I want to just write them, I'm going to link those with a VCA fader and just write that VCA fader if I need to bring those down. So that would be a way I'm going to use the VCA fader. Another thing that I do that is also part of my mix template is all of my effects channels, like reverbs and delays mainly, will also be linked to a VCA fader, because all of those are going to be routed into their specific instrument on the specific instrument buses they serve. So all the reverbs I use for drums are going to be routed into the mix bus drum group. Same for guitars and vocals. But let's say I just want to listen to my mix without any effects. They are routed into that same, not routed, but they are linked to the same VCA fader that I can just mute all at once.
Yeah.
But it's there, but I actually never do it. So
I don't use VCAs. I understand the use of them. But I've just have extensive buses, and that's been enough for me. So
there you go. What else do we have? I think you know what? Let's
Felipe Oliveira is going to buy my book, which I'm very happy about. Thank you for reading.
That's cool. Yeah. So guys, you need to check this book out. I'm gonna leave the link after the stream. I'm gonna add the link below of this very cool book. It's actually that book was part of my top 5 books of last year.
Wow.
I actually made a video on that. If you want to check it out.
Thank you. I don't think I've even seen it.
Oh, okay. Go watch it.
Well, now I need all the ego stroking I can get.
I think that was released at the end of December.
Okay.
If I remember correctly. So it's not too far away.
Yeah.
What do we have here? I use an old Yamaha DM2000 as a control surface. It has a great integration with Cubase, 24 faders, a meter bridge, timecode, transport control, sans, and EQ control of channel strip, EQ, and blah. Yeah, that works pretty well. I used to work with a Yamaha. Oh man, I forgot. It's the OV96.
Okay.
I think. Yeah, 0OV1, yeah, something like that. And I used it as a control surface as well with Cubase, which worked well. And I used the preamp like as extra preamps to the ones I have. That also worked very well.
Yeah. There's a question from Shelly Moreira. She's a little bit up there. She says, I'll let you find it.
Let me find it. There you go.
I struggle a lot with reverbs for snare and vocals. Can you speak a little bit about your approach for those tracks? So I have a dedicated snare stretch bus that usually has a plate of some sort, maybe some saturation, so that I can process the reverb of the snare differently than maybe adding an overall ambience to the kit. It just makes maybe it gives the snare it's a special space in the mix. And then I have a vocal space of I have two depth and space buses for vocals. I have the ADT, which is an automatic double tracking bus, which just has a doubler, a stereo delay, the real ADT plugin, and that I don't use all of them at the same time, but those are designed for depth and sort of adding a little bit of sort of automatic double tracking, so it feels fuller. And then I have vocal space, which has a stereo delay and a reverb on it that I will either use independently or individually, or sometimes I'll add a delay before or after a reverb. It's cool to add a delay before a reverb because then the reverb sort of diffuses the delay repeats. And then if you add a delay after a reverb, the delay sort of like enhances, kind of creates this like weird, like slightly bigger space on it. It's a strange thing to do, but it works really well.
I like that. For snare, I'm a big fan of plate reverbs. Sometimes chambers also can do the trick. And I also a big fan of using samples, room samples. And not sound replace, but add that to but use the room sound of a drum library and add that to your mix. That also is very cool for snare.
Cool.
It has gives me a bit more of a natural type of vibe, depending on the song I'm mixing, of course.
Yeah, I should try
vocal that. It's a bit like you, it's a bunch of stuff, combination of a bit of sometimes a plate, sometimes a hall, it depends. And also I'm a big fan of delays, of course. Right. Snap delays, and also so some typical maybe not ping pong delays. I'm going to use them for vocal delay throws.
Right.
But stereo delay can be very cool. Also, maybe a mono delay, mono reverb. Also, there's a bunch of stuff that you can combine all together, and I really like what you said. Also, to add a delay to a reverb and vice versa, and even sometimes compression can be added on totally. Filtering the reverb. Also, if you want your vocal to sit well in the with the reverb, maybe you can filter out the signal coming into the reverb.
EQing the reverbs and the spaces and the effects is super valuable because you can clutter up a mix really fast by letting the low end rampant on all of your buses. Yeah,
and if you don't get rid of the sparkles on top, that can also bring up the fake character of a reverb.
Right. Yeah, because those high end like hisses and stuff like that, it drives me nuts.
Yeah, exactly.
And because it's supposed to sound natural, but it isn't. And it's also just like kind of sounds like flutter echo, and that just it doesn't sound good to me at all. So cutting out the high end of reverbs just smooths everything out.
Yeah, exactly. And using the pre-delay of the reverb also, that also is going to help you to keep the vocal up front and have a very nice tail of the reverb. Or you can also, if you want to go a step further, a side chain compression on a reverb.
Right. Oh, totally.
Vocal also works very well, even with the snare as well. That it's endless.
Yeah, I had a video on my channel about that exact thing, side chaining a delay to a vocal, so that whenever the vocal phrase stopped, the delay would come in and wouldn't clutter up the of the vocal when the vocal was actually singing.
That's cool. That's very cool. And okay, what would be a bundle that you would recommend for mixing a bundle of two?
Yeah, what's the go-to bundle for mixing and mastering?
There you go.
I would.
Pretty cool for mastering.
Which one?
Ozone 9 is pretty cool for mastering.
Yeah, Ozone 9. Somebody was asking about Ozone 8 earlier, and
Right.
I have Ozone 9. I only have Elements, so I only have the cheap version because I'm cheap. and but it does the trick because I have I have other plugins for other things, but I would recommend that don't buy a mixing mastering bundle before you've mastered your plugins that you already have.
Yeah.
Because if you think that a $300 or probably a $500 mix bundle from Isotope or whatever the expensive ones are, like FabFilter has a good one, Isotope has a good one, but if you haven't mastered compression and EQ by just using the stock plugins that you have, you should start there.
Listen, I'm releasing a new single tomorrow. Funny thing, we were talking about that. It's a project I've been working that we release one single once in a while. Usually instrumental music, but now we wrote a song with a very good friend of mine who is a singer, and this is going to be released tomorrow. And on purpose, I mixed everything in Cubase with stock plugins out of Cubase, the entire full mix.
Yeah,
the entire thing. Yeah. I got it mastered by someone else, but as far as the mix goes, everything was done in Cubase with stock plugins. So pay attention to what you're going to listen to tomorrow on my channel. I'm going to upload a lyrical video on the channel so you can have a listen. And I'm actually working on a new course, a mixing course in Cubase using this song also. So it's going to be out soon.
Yeah, I have quickmixing.com is like my quick mixing course in Logic using only stock plugins, and it's basically like how I teach EQ and compression in a very, very short period of time.
But you're right, Bjorgvin. This is something super important to be able to, like, if you're not able to work a decent mix out of your stock plugins,
yeah,
that means you need to do it more.
Yeah.
Before getting into premium plugins.
You either need to spend more time understanding the processors,
exactly,
but you also need to make sure that, like, if you are really knowledgeable about it and you know exactly what you're doing, and the mix still isn't sounding right, maybe it's more the production or the performance or the recording.
Yeah.
Often I get songs that I don't want to mix because they are too sloppy and just aren't well performed, and it's really hard to use a compressor to fix an out of tune vocal. I mean, you can not use a compressor, but you can fix an out of tune vocal, but like that's more of a performance and a production and recording issue than which plugin bundle do I need to buy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because if you're mixing your own songs, the songs that you record, I think the best mixing tip we can give you is to have a good recording before you hit the mixing stage.
Oh yeah,
good performance and a good recording quality, and this is going to improve the end result of your mix way more than a bundle of plugins for sure.
Totally.
Chillum, you guys are making my day happy. Such a good conversation. Thank you for being here. And guys, again, thank you all for being here on this chat. It's very cool that that a lot of you are still here. That's amazing. Click the like button on Facebook and here on YouTube. This helps the channel a lot. And let's go with Tribe of David Studios. What do you use to give air to vocals without creating sibilance?
So sibilance tends to be in, well, like quote unquote 6 to 8K or whatever, right?
Mhm.
And I would want to say that air is 10K and above. But sometimes sibilance also has harmonics at the double frequency of the fundamental sibilance frequency, which would be like 6 or 7K. So at 12 to 14K. So maybe if you do serial de-essing at both 6 and 7, 6 or 7, and then at 10 or 12 or 14, you can take that sibilance out, but then you can still add a general air overall after that with just an EQ. You can also use oral exciters or like an exciter plugin that adds sort of artificial high end.
Yeah.
So, and then you can also add a de-esser after an exciter.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, don't be afraid to DS. You can DS at the beginning of the chain and at the end of the chain as well. You know,
right.
Using two DS, a couple of DSers in your chain is not going to kill you.
Right.
That's why we have two DSers on the Andrew Sheps plugin.
Yeah, that's right.
And then we have.
I like Tribe of David Studios logo there. Cool.
It's a cool one, eh? Let's see that again. Man, it's a nice logo.
Yeah.
I have to say. Yeah. And then look at when the project is mixed down, the automation made never sounds in the playback. Any experience with this?
No.
Not really, no.
Are you printing it and there's a box checked somewhere that says like don't print automation or something like that? Because that's not my experience when I'm using automation.
And same person in Cubase 10.5, there is a plugin, AnyMix Pro, which is found in the spatial plus panner category. And it's very good for pan automation, almost anyway. This is something that I didn't use yet, to be honest with you. But that's cool. I'm gonna have to take a look.
Yeah.
Great choice in headphone. Okay, let me check if I have a couple. We're gonna wrap up soon, so last call if you have any more questions.
Yeah. Pepper us with questions before the end. So, and then
okay. Paul is like, where did Chris go?
Okay,
Chris is back.
Needs the hat. I need a haircut.
I'm actually thinking of shaving my hair, man.
Oh man,
like it's summertime, man. I need to... Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking of it. Let me know if let me know in the comment if you want me to shave my hair.
Yeah.
Okay, Neutron. Have you worked with you talked about Neutron earlier, didn't you?
No, Nectar.
Nectar, okay, because I never worked with Neutron as well. Nectar.
Yeah.
Any experience with the Lorsen mastering console?
No. Oh. I'm familiar with him as a mastering engineer, but I haven't used that particular piece.
How do you not wear out your mouse wheel finger?
Take breaks.
And use the fader port 16.
Yeah, the same way I don't wear on my ears is taking breaks.
Exactly. And again, this is something super important while mixing, taking breaks. I cannot say that enough. It's like, mixing sometimes is like playing video games. You just can't stop.
Right.
There's a danger there. At some point you just lose some perspective, and it's just a good thing to, just get out of the studio, go for a walk, come back to the mix later on. Doesn't matter, and you're gonna have a way better perspective on what's happening in your mix, what's good and what's not good about the mix, and what needs to be worked on.
For sure.
Yeah, and also something that I like to do, and I talked about that on one of my videos, is to listen to the mix when I'm near the end of the mix, I'm going to listen to the final mix with the monitor screen off.
Huh.
This way, it forces me to listen more than watching the mix going on in my DAW.
That's good. That's a good idea.
And I have a notebook, and I just take notes of what needs to be worked on or balanced better or whatever.
I tend to go to the kitchen that's just outside the door, and I crank up the speakers in here, and then I just listen in the kitchen. I feel like it's a good way to sort of see if everything is audible and sort of,
That's cool.
because I want the song to be recognizable when I'm sitting in a loud restaurant talking to a group of people and there's cacophonous noise of silverware everywhere and people chatting in the next booth and all that. I want to be able to hear the low quality speakers that are overhead, and I want to know that I can actually identify the song, because you can totally do that with great mixes.
That's cool. Yeah, that's a very good idea. That's a very good idea. Okay, can we email you questions later? Yes, you can. Actually, you know what? You can leave your questions directly in the comment section down below. The video, the live stream is going to stay on YouTube.
Yeah.
And you can just leave your questions down below. And you can also send an email to Bjorgvin.
Yeah. I answer questions, all reader questions during these happy hour sessions. We took it to Chris's YouTube channel today, but usually I have a happy hour session on my own YouTube channel
every Thursday.
Yeah, more or less every Thursday, unless something's up.
At 4 or 4:30 PST.
4:30 p.m. my time, which is Pacific time. It's technically Arizona time, but Arizona doesn't change, so it's Pacific time right now.
And then I have my good friend Patrice. Go man, shave that. So okay, Pat.
One vote for, no vote against.
There you go. We have a couple of questions here. Yeah, Chris, your last video on delay throws is gold. Thank you very much. I'm happy it helps.
Cool.
That was fun to do, actually. What is this one? But not too short, sunburn. Oh yeah, but I live in Quebec, so even if we get like a couple of days of hot weather, it's going to cool down right after. So I'm not worried about a sunburn.
I am. It's 100 degrees right now, so
you're in Tucson, Arizona, so it's pretty hot there. Okay, when you get a whole record project, do you work in separate projects for every song?
Yeah.
Or all together in one? Yes. Every song will have its own mix project for sure.
Yeah. It'll all probably be based on the same mix template.
Yeah.
But it's all separate files and separate sessions for ease of organization, if anything.
Definitely. How do you often I'm going to read it from here. How do you often do you find that you want to change the tempo of a track of a project? I find that when I do change the tempo of a project while using Cubase, I hear audio issues with the vocal track. Go on audioissues.com.
Well, I mean, I feel like there is going to be an issue if you're trying to stretch the audio or compress the audio using elastic time or something like that. You might get away with it if you're recording at super high sample rates, but you want to make sure that you are actually like you may need to re-record the vocal.
That's the thing, those tools to change the tempo and to work with all those different algorithms that we have in Cubase and other DAW. They're cool tools and they work well. In the mixing situation, when you're near the final stage of your production, I avoid that. I avoid using those. I'm going to use those in a pre-prod situation when I'm working on the song. I'm still working on the arrangement of the song, and I want to try different tempos without having to record everything. I'm going to use those tools. They're going to be very, very useful. But once I'm done with it, I'm going to re-record everything if everything has been stretched out.
Right.
Because I don't want to end up with any kind of stretching effects while I'm mixing, while the song is almost done. At this point, live with the tempo and move forward.
Yeah.
Paul Twist, he's back. Yes, I am. And then True, that's only for his music production, not so. Okay.
People
That
are
was
chatting
pretty fun burn.
with themselves.
Do you guys listen in your car? We answered that earlier.
Yep.
I don't, because I don't drive my car a lot.
I
And
do it
so,
rarely. It's only if it happens to, if I happen to be in a mixed revision, uh, in the mixed revision process when I'm going somewhere and I remember, but it's not a part of my usual go-to translation process.
should we turn off the vocal effects or not? Give me a context.
Yeah.
If you're still here on the chat, you can, because yeah, maybe there's a follow-up question or context.
Yeah, that'd be great.
You just made a sale.
All right. So the book. Yes. Thank you. Thank
That's
you.
awesome. And his book is also available on Kindle. Okay, so
Yeah. Step by Step Mixing is available at stepbystepmixing.com, either through the Amazon paperback or Kindle, or through my site on the same URL, and you get the PDF and the Kindle format there.
So I think there's okay. Let's take one last one. Do you master with frequent stock frequent stock plugins to set bass in mono?
Oh, well, I guess what he's trying to get at is, do you filter out maybe in the mid or side to get the bass in mono or something like that? I tend to put a side EQ sometimes where I filter everything out on the sides below maybe 70 to 80 hertz. Sometimes, not all the time.
Yeah. There's a plugin that I use from Brainworks that does that. I forgot the name of the plugin. It's that whole EQ thing going on where you can
It has like the mid side stuff. I can't remember.
yeah, and you can actually mono the lower frequencies.
Yeah.
If you and stuff like so that can be cool, on some on a mix bus or in mastering for sure. That can be useful. Is this something I do all the time when I master? I mix more than I master, okay, to be honest. And when I master, it's not necessarily something that I'm going to do all the time. It's not like everything that I do, whether it's mixing or master, has to have a reason. If I insert a plugin, I need to have a reason to do it. So if I need to do this with this type of plugin, I will, but I'm going to have a reason to. Generally, what instruments should be panned down the middle? Kick, snare, vocal.
Yeah, and bass maybe. Yeah, those are like the best practices. That's the common thing. But you listen to the Beatles, the drums are on the left or right. And fun fact about the bass on Sgt. Pepper's is that Sgt. Pepper's bass was actually all recorded at the end. And then the bass, so Paul played the bass basically as a lead guitar player. That's why that bass sound is so prominent on the record.
Yeah. It's an interesting album. This is something that if you never heard that album, you're missing a lot.
Yeah.
The way it was recorded and mixed at the same time. Everything was done on a 4-track system.
Right.
Back then.
Yeah.
So you needed to bounce, as you go.
Yeah.
So it was like,
Yeah.
That would be the way to do it back then. Very interesting. So that's why you have the drums on one side and the bass on the other side. So it was left or right, nothing in the middle.
Totally.
So yeah, I would say, kick, snare, vocals, basically, and whatever else you want in the middle to be up front.
Yeah.
And then, please, how can I import or export MIDI quantized to Cubase 10? This is a question, just write that down in the comment section. I can send a link to a video that I did to import MIDI stuff in Cubase and stuff. I'm going to link you to a video. So just paste that into the comment section.
And Ross Donaldson is asking, how did you get from Iceland to Tucson? You should listen to the Working Class Audio podcast I'm on 2 weeks ago, I think. I talk about it there. It's too long of a story to get into at the moment. So that's a pretty good episode that talks about this my journey, really. So
with my good friend Matt Boudreau, that was on the live stream last week.
Yeah.
He has a podcast, and Bjorgvin was on. So go listen to it. Okay, let's start to wrap things up. I just want, okay, we answered that one. I use a GGP bass to spread the bass a bit. Do you guys have another suggestion?
No, I mean I know that that is popular. I've been in on a presentation where Sylvia Massey has done the same exact thing.
Mm,
And but if you want wider bass, I tend to have a stereo widening bus that if I want things wider, I'll send it there. And that just has an imager plugin on it.
that's cool. Yeah, same here. I don't work with GGP, but I never tried it actually, so I couldn't tell. So there you go. So I think we're gonna wrap things up. We've been here like for a bit less than 2 hours already.
It's been great.
That was pretty fun.
Yeah. No, I hope
Well,
everybody found it helpful and useful and felt heard with their questions. I hope
yeah, we tried to answer everything that we saw. So sorry if we missed your question,
Yeah.
but we did our best to answer everybody's question. So
Yeah.
um,
We didn't answer John Owings. He's a student of mine. Do you use
okay.
a Mixcube or any other small speaker? We've talked about this. I use a baritone Mixcube in mono, and you use something similar.
Yeah, it's something similar that someone gave me. It starts with the Z. It's too tiny, so I can't read. It's an old type of square thing or a tone type. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So definitely one shitty speaker per studio.
Yeah, and I don't use reference 4 with those though. That's the only thing I,
No,
you
me
know.
neither. Yeah.
So there you go. So finally, you both have a life outside the studio, and yes, and we're gonna go right to it.
Yeah.
Right now.
For me and the wife.
Yeah, yeah. So Bjorgvin is married, and I have 2 daughters, and I'm married also.
Yeah.
And we actually met, the 4 of us, when Bjorgvin came to Montreal. Was that like 3 years ago already?
Yeah, I think it was 3 years ago.
Goodness.
Liz was there for a NAFTA meeting, and I tagged along because basically when she went on work trips, that's a 2-for-1 trip to wherever she's going, and that's a good thing because the employer pays for her and I pay for my own way. And then we did a video, so it was a write-off.
Oh, you know what? I think I'm gonna I'm gonna link that video. That was where we recorded just a quick
Yeah.
song, just for
Yeah.
the YouTube channel. Well, that was actually fun.
Yeah. No, we have a life. I have a lot of friends here in Tucson that I don't see anymore, but they are hopefully still there. But I usually do this full time audio issues, and but otherwise I enjoy a good craft beer and a book, and currently watching Future Man on Hulu, which is a hilarious TV show. So
Never heard of it.
TV, books, and brews. That's my outside life.
Oh, cool. I love cooking. I know that you do too.
Oh yeah, cooking, yeah, for sure.
And yeah, I just bought myself a Weber barbecue,
Oh really?
charcoal barbecue, and that I used to smoke stuff as well. I love smoking stuff, so yeah, I'm a big fan of the kitchen and the barbecue and the grill. So that's
We're making an outside living room and kitchen.
Man,
We couldn't get a pool, so I'm making basically just we're taking the entire backyard and converting it into an outside patio because it's so hot in the summer, and we're gonna make it so that we don't have to, even if quarantine goes on forever, we don't need to go anywhere because I'll have a better
cool.
allowance hang area in the backyard. Yeah.
Good for you, man. That's awesome. So, guys, thank you for being here today. We're going to wrap this up. Bjorgvin, anything you want to add before we leave?
No, just thank you so much for having me. Thanks so much for your questions. I hope it was super useful. If you want to know more about me, obviously Audio Issues is a good place to go. Step-by-Step Mixing is my book that has helped thousands of people. Chris has it. It supposedly is very valuable, but I wouldn't know because I wrote it. And if you want to know more about me, feel free to email me. Join the email list, email me back, and we'll be friends.
That's cool. So, guys, thanks again. Before you go, just click on the like button just before you leave. And I'm going to see you guys next week on another live stream. And also, I'm probably going to have time because I'm working on a few projects right now. I'm probably going to have time to do an extra video next week. Also, anyways, take care, guys. Stay safe. And I'm going to see you next time. Thank you again, Bjorgvin.
Rock on.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.